They told him no. The first time it felt small, almost ordinary. A word people use every day. He nodded, as if it meant nothing. As if it would pass like a brief wind, but it did not pass. It returned. Again and again. Each time it came, it sounded simple, calm, final. No anger, no explanation, just a quiet refusal. And yet, with every repetition, the word grew heavier. It began to settle inside him, like a stone placed gently but firmly in his chest. He wondered why such a small word could carry so much weight. At first, he tried not to think about it. He told himself it was nothing, that everyone hears no sometimes, that it is part of life. But when you hear it often enough, it begins to follow you. It waits for you in the quiet moments. It echoes when there is no other sound. No, it would return at night when the world grew still, when there was no one to impress, no one to answer to, only his own thoughts, only the soft rhythm of his breathing. He would lie awake and ask himself, gently, without accusation, what am I missing? There was no anger in him. Not yet. Only a quiet confusion. A soft ache that did not shout, but stayed. They would look at him with careful eyes, some with pity, some with distance, some with a polite smile that never reached warmth. They did not say much after the refusal. The silence that followed felt longer than the word itself. It is strange how silence can sometimes wound more than speech. He began to notice the pattern, the way hope would rise inside him before each attempt, the way his heart would open just slightly, and then the closing, the gentle shutting of a door he had hoped might stay open. He did not protest. He did not argue his case. He did not try to force their understanding. He simply stepped back. But stepping back does not mean you feel nothing. Inside him, something stirred each time. A question, a doubt, a quiet voice asking, am I not enough? He would walk alone afterward, slowly, watching the ground beneath his feet, listening to the world continue as if nothing had happened. Birds still moved. The wind still carried its cool breath. The sky did not change color because of his disappointment. Life continued, and he remained quiet within it. There were moments when he almost spoke, when he almost tried to explain himself, to defend his effort, to show them what they could not see. The words would gather at the edge of his mouth, but something held him still. Perhaps it was pride. Perhaps it was dignity. Or perhaps it was simply exhaustion. How many times can a person knock before their hand grows tired? By the 10th rejection, he felt the sting clearly. By the 50th, he felt something else. Not sharper, but deeper. The ache was no longer sudden. It had become familiar, a quiet companion. And then came the 100th, when they told him no for the 100th time. The word did not surprise him. It did not shake him the way it once had. It arrived like an old visitor, known, expected. He listened. He nodded. And then he stepped away, carrying the word with him once more. But something was different. He did not feel the same rush of embarrassment, the same urgent need to hide. Instead, There was a stillness, a pause inside him that felt almost steady. He sat alone that evening, not trying to distract himself, not trying to forget, just sitting. He noticed his breathing, the rise and fall of his chest, the quiet space around him, and within that space, he began to observe his own reaction. The hurt was there, but so was something else. A quiet strength forming without noise, without announcement. In the silence after the 100th no, he did not break. He simply listened to the quiet and stayed. After the 100th no, something restless began to move inside him. It was not loud. It did not shout, but it burned quietly, like a small flame hidden beneath ash. A part of him wanted to speak, to finally explain what they had never asked to hear, would replay their faces in his mind. The calm refusal, the slight turning away, the way they had already decided before he finished trying. And inside, a voice would rise. Tell them, show them, make them understand. It presses gently on the heart. They thought his quiet meant he had little to offer. They mistook his patience for weakness. They believed that if he had something worth hearing, he would have fought harder to be heard. They waited for him to react. Perhaps they expected anger. Perhaps they expected pleading. Something dramatic. Something that would prove he cared. But he remained still. And yet, the fire inside him did not disappear. It asked questions. It stirred his pride. It whispered that silence might look like surrender. He began to notice how quickly the body wants to defend itself, how the chest tightens, how the breath shortens, how words line up, ready to be released. Have you ever felt that? The urge to correct every false idea about you. The need to protect your image, your worth, your story. He felt it clearly. There were moments when his hands would clench without him noticing. Moments when his jaw tightened at the memory of their dismissive tone. He imagined standing before them, speaking calmly but firmly, laying out all they had failed to see. He could have done it. He could have explained the long hours, the silent effort, the quiet hope he carried each time he tried again. He could have shown them that his stillness was not emptiness. But something deeper asked him to wait. What would change if they understood? Would the word no disappear? Would their approval suddenly fill the space inside him? Or would he simply become louder, chasing that was never truly his? He began to sit with this fire instead of feeding it. When the urge to speak rose up, he watched it. When the need to defend himself tightened his chest, he breathed through it. It was not easy. Silence, when chosen in the face of misunderstanding, feels almost unnatural. The world teaches us to respond, to argue, to prove. They watched him carefully, some with curiosity, some with quiet judgment. Perhaps they thought his silence meant defeat. Perhaps they believed he had finally given up, but they could not see what was happening within him. Each time he refused to react, the fire changed. It no longer burned wildly. It became steady, controlled. He realized that not every misunderstanding needs correction. Not every opinion deserves an answer. Sometimes, speaking only ties you to the very thing you wish to rise above. Late at night, the imagined conversations would return. He would hear himself explaining, defending, justifying. He would feel the satisfaction of being understood. Then he would open his eyes to the quiet room around him. Stillness. No applause. No arguments. Only the soft rhythm of his own breath. He began to understand that the real battle was not with them. It was with the part of himself that feared being unseen. Why do we crave to be understood so deeply? Why does silence feel like invisibility? He did not yet have all the answers, but he began to see that reacting would not restore his dignity. It would only expose his need for their approval. And so he chose restraint, not because he had nothing to say, but because he was beginning to see the sea. Ostov saying it. The fire within him did not die. It transformed. It became quieter, more focused, less desperate. They waited for a reaction. He offered them none. And in that quiet refusal to defend himself, something within him grew more solid, more grounded, as if he were slowly stepping into a deeper understanding of his own strength. There came a quiet evening when he noticed something new. The fire that once rushed to his throat no longer rose so quickly. The word no still arrived from time to time, carried in familiar voices. They still turned away. They still misunderstood. But inside him, the reaction had softened. It was not that he felt nothing. He felt it all. The slight tightening in his chest. The brief sting of being unseen. The old memory of 100 refusals. But now, there was space between the feeling and his response. A small pause. In that pause, he began to see clearly. He realized that every time he chose not to react, he was not losing something. He was protecting something. Something fragile and important. His self-respect. What is self-respect? If not the quiet decision to remain steady when others expect you to shake? They had measured him by his reactions, by how loudly he defended himself, by how strongly he tried to change their minds. They believed strength was noise. He began to see that strength could also be silence. There is a difference between silence born from fear and silence chosen from clarity. Before, he had been silent because he did not know what to say, because he felt small beneath their judgments. But now, his silence felt different. It felt deliberate, calm, almost dignified. He no longer rehearsed arguments in his mind at night. The imagined conversations began to fade. The need to correct every misunderstanding grew weaker. Why must every false idea be chased? Why must every doubt be answered? He understood something simple, yet deep. People see only what they are ready to see. No amount of explanation can force open-closed eyes, and so he let them see what they wished. He remained steady. There is a quiet power in not rushing to defend yourself. When you do not react, you are no longer tied to their words. You are no longer pulled by their approval or rejection. You begin to stand on your own ground. He felt this grounding slowly. When they dismissed him, he did not shrink. When they questioned him, he did not hurry to prove. He listened, he nodded, and then he returned to his own path. Inside, something solid was forming. It felt like a deep root growing unseen beneath the soil. No one applauded it. No one noticed it, but it was there, holding him steady. He began to see that restraint is not weakness. It is discipline. It is the ability to hold your emotions gently without letting them spill onto every surface. He watched others react quickly. Words spoken in heat, pride flaring up, regret following closely behind. He had once been tempted by that same release, but now he observed it with distance. What would he gain by reacting? A moment of relief, a brief satisfaction, and then what? The quiet within him felt more valuable. There is a certain peace that comes when you no longer need to win every exchange, when you no longer need to be understood by everyone, when your worth is no longer hanging in the hands of those who cannot see it. He began to carry himself differently, not louder, not prouder, just steadier. The 100 no's had not broken him. They had shaped him. They had taught him to sit with discomfort, to endure misunderstanding without losing himself. And slowly, he understood that silence was not the absence of strength. It was the presence of control. It was the quiet refusal to let others dictate his inner state. They may never know what changed inside him. But he knew, and that was enough. One morning, he woke up and noticed something simple. The world had not changed. The same voices still spoke. The same doors still opened and closed, as they always had. They still carried their opinions. They still offered their quiet refusals when they wished. And yet, something inside him felt different. It was not excitement. It was not victory. It was something softer. Peace. He moved through the day without expecting anything from them. Not approval, not understanding, not even acceptance. The heavy weighting he once carried had quietly disappeared. He had stopped looking outward for confirmation. The 100 no's no longer echoed at night. They had become part of his story, but not the center of it. They were like distant footsteps fading behind him. He realized that what once felt like rejection had slowly become protection. Each refusal had removed him from places where he did not belong. Each closed door had kept him from bending himself into shapes that were not true. He sat alone that evening, not in sadness, but in stillness. The silence around him felt different now. It no longer pressed against his chest. It no longer asked questions about his worth. It simply existed. And within that quiet, he felt whole. Have you ever noticed how powerful it feels to need nothing from anyone in that moment? Not their praise, not their reassurance, not their agreement, just your own steady breath. They still saw him as quiet. Some may have continued to mistake his calm for weakness, but their view no longer touched him in the same way. He understood something that cannot be easily explained. When you stop reacting, you stop surrendering pieces of yourself. When you stop chasing validation, you begin to hold your energy differently. It stays with you. It strengthens you. He did not become cold. He did not become distant. He simply became centered. Before, every word spoken about him felt like a stone thrown into still water. Now, the water remained clear. A word might land, but it did not disturb the depths. He had learned to separate their voices from his own. This was the change, not a sudden reward. No applause from the outside. Only a quiet understanding inside. He saw clearly that his value had never depended on their yes. It had never been reduced by their no. It had simply been waiting for him to see it without their reflection. And now, he did. He walked with less urgency. He listened without tension. When refusal came again, he received it calmly as one receives the weather. It is simply what it is. There is freedom in that acceptance. He no longer felt the need to prove that he was strong. The need to prove disappears when strength becomes natural. The power they never saw was not loud. It did not demand attention. It lived in his restraint, in his discipline, in his ability to remain unmoved by what once unsettled him. He had gained something far greater than approval. He had gained himself. And so, the story did not end with a grand turning point. It ended quietly. A man who had been rejected 100 times now stood steady, not because the world changed, but because he did. He no longer needed their answer. His silence had become his own.